Hello, Michael Swain here after Kansas football's 48-17 win over Missouri State. KU starts the 2023 season with what ended up being a pretty convincing win, even though I think there's a little portion there of kind of the late in the first quarter and the second quarter where it felt like we might be getting a closer contest, but in the end, KU pulls out a pretty huge win. A lot of thoughts about this game overall. I think first and foremost, you got to start at the quarterback position. Jalon Daniels did not play on Friday night. Lance Leipold, we just wrapped up our press conference with him. He said that Daniels got reps in practice this week, but did not get enough to make the coaching staff feel comfortable about starting him for this game. So Jason Bean was the one that got more of the reps over the course of the week. He gets the start. And what a stellar performance. We have to start by talking about Jason Bean because it's an incredible luxury that Kansas has Jason Bean on its roster right now. You're telling me other teams in the Big 12 like Iowa State, Oklahoma State wouldn't love to have Jason Bean competing for the starting spot at their school, and he decided to come back to Kansas to be the number 2, and here he is with the opportunity. And if you were to read off the stat line for Bean, which I've got right here, 22 of 28 passing for 276 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. If you were to tell me that 3 weeks ago, that's the stat line Jalon Daniels had in this game, I'd tell you that's a really good start to the season for Daniels, and you'd have a lot of confidence in him going into week 2. Well, now there are going to be more questions going into next week, obviously, with Jalon Daniels, his status. Is he going to get enough first-team reps over the course of these next 7 days to be able to play against Illinois? If not, if Jason Bean goes, there's still got to be some confidence. He's shown that he has improved since his first game here 2 years ago against South Dakota to now. He looks entirely different, and he has continued to work at it and improve, and it's something he deserves a ton of credit for. Outside of that, I think the offense was pretty solid. The running game, the fumbles came back again with Daniel Hishaw, but he's one that bounced back later in the game. Great to see him get in the end zone, show some of that physicality that made him such an imposing runner. Devin Neal looked like Devin Neal. He seems like if he can stay healthy, he's ready for a breakout season. He was stellar tonight. And just the running backs top to bottom, you run through them, right? Dylan McDuffie, his first carry goes for a touchdown. Even Sevion Morrison gets in later in the game. He gets a touchdown as well. That position group looked good. I think you've seen some of the coaching from the offseason go to the wide receivers, where they focused a lot on yards after the catch. Well, Lawrence Arnold got some of that over the middle. Of course, he and Quentin Skinner as well got some deep opportunities. So I think top to bottom, the offense looked good. I think the offensive line looked all right. Kobe Baines got the start at right guard, which is a little bit different than what we saw on the depth chart, which had Armaje Reed-Adams starting left guard and Michael Ford starting right guard. Baines moved in at right guard. He's the 6th offensive lineman for KU this year, with Armaj missing the game due to injury. Now, defensively, I thought this defense looked a lot different than what you saw last year, and that starts up front. It's something I've written about in the preseason. It's something the coaches, the players have talked a lot about, but this defensive front has so much more athleticism than last year's. And you could see that on the field. You could see the power that they generated at the line of scrimmage, getting knocked back, getting into the backfield. And even if those guys didn't end up with tackles for loss or sacks, what that did was it gave the linebackers more space to go and hit, and the running backs less room to maneuver and make second cuts. So overall, I was super impressed with that defensive front. I think you look at guys like Devin Phillips, Gage Keys, Austin Booker, even some like Dylan Brooks came in on his first snap as a Jayhawk, helps generate enough pass rush for Jeremy Robinson to get a sack. Those are some of the newcomers that stood out. Hayden Hatcher found himself around the ball, 7 tackles. Jeremy Robinson, again, I thought it was super fascinating. You saw him move into defensive tackle on the first 3rd and long of the game. I have a feeling we'll see more of that from KU this year as they try and get creative to generate more pass rush. So overall, I think the defense played pretty well. Now, let's talk about what went wrong during that portion of the game where it felt like things were starting to slip away from KU. There's a fumble from Hishaw that leads to a touchdown for Missouri State, and then KU tries to go for it on a 4th and short. If you go back and look at that play, Mason Fairchild misses a block and allows the linebacker to make a play on Devin Neal. KU turns the ball over. I believe that led to a Missouri State field goal. Offensively, you're looking at that and saying that's probably 10 points at minimum for KU, right? If they kick a field goal instead of the 4th down, Seth Keller's got the leg to make that a field goal. And for all we know, KU had the momentum to go get a touchdown when Hishaw fumbled it. So theoretically, you look at the score here and it says 48-17. You think that's a good score, right? This could have been in the 50s if that lull didn't happen. But I think this is the perfect type of game for Lance Leipold, because there's enough in this game to make you feel good about next week. The offense showed out. The defense showed its athleticism. They created turnovers. They really wore down the opponent, suffocated them in the second half. But there's also enough to coach up over the next week, right? The fumbles. I think there's some missed tackles defensively. There are things that the coaching staff can harp on while still having a really dominant win in their back pocket. So overall, I think a really impressive performance from Kansas, the type of performance I think you'd want to see from a team over a mediocre FCS program, FCS team, is just dominate. And I think that's exactly what Kansas did. So it leads up to now a pretty big game against Illinois next week. I'm certainly fired up for that. As for content, we've got a podcast with Kevin Flaherty coming your way Sunday morning. We've got plenty of stuff for you to read up on fog.net. We'll have some takeaways, columns, quotes, everything you could ever want. So make sure you're checking out fog.net for the latest KU football coverage, plus big recruiting weekend for KU basketball. We got plenty of coverage on that too. Also a flash sale going on. You can join right now for $4.50. Get VIP for the next year, 50% off. These deals don't come around very often, so make sure you're taking advantage of that as well. So overall, good night for KU. Plenty of content to come on fog.net.